what's the beef? The biggest off-the-court storyline in the W this week. Originally, when I first sat down to make the rundown with producer Dimitri, Kevin, I noted the Dewanna Bonner fallout and all of the conspiracy theorists who have suddenly come out of the woodwork on Reddit.com and on the Twitter machine, X, whatever you call it these days, who have inside sources of Dewanna couldn't handle the spotlight, and maybe even a national reporter or two is also trying to run with that. What do you make of the decision for her to be waived by the Indiana Fever and now currently sitting on the sidelines as a free agent?
Well, I'm not surprised we're here. Not for any of the conspiracy theories, not for anything unrelated to basketball, right? She was not a good fit for the Indiana Fever. They wanted to bring in a high-level veteran with toughness, experienced locker room leader. She did all of that. It didn't make sense basketball-wise. She's not the fastest player. She's long and lanky and made a lot of baskets based on her intelligence. She's not that fast. She's not a high jumper. She's not overly strong. The Fever want to play up-tempo. They're moving the ball up the court as fast as they can to get shots up and get open shots. That is not her game. Her entire career has been based on half-court offense, methodically getting to the post or her mid-range and working from there in a slow, direct set or play call offense. The Fever don't play that way. And she doesn't play that way, or she doesn't play the way the Fever needed to. So from a basketball perspective, it was never a fit. It's only a one-year deal. So at the end of the day, releasing her, cutting her, however you want to phrase it, it doesn't make a huge impact. And if a player's that unhappy and doesn't want to be around and loses her starting spot and she's, on her way to potentially the Hall of Fame, she leaves borderline. I mean, she's third all time in scoring. Like, you let that player go to save face for everybody involved. Just a basketball perspective, it made no sense. So I'm not surprised we're here. The rest of it, I'll let other people run with. But she just didn't fit next to Boston. She didn't fit next to Smith, who I know is no longer on the team. That's why they traded her before the season.
We're going to get to her in a second.
Exactly. And when you play an up-tempo game, it also forces you to play up-tempo defense because other teams are trying to run with you. She's not set out there to be a guarding guards who have a lot of ball skills. She needs to be playing in the post. It just didn't make sense from a fit perspective. So I'm not surprised that they're both moving on from each other.
Because then you were trying to square peg, circle hole, the likes of Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, players who need to play up-tempo in order to be maximized at their potential. I know we don't want to speculate, but I've already seen the Twitter sleuths suggesting that the Phoenix Mercury, now with about $85 million in cap space, does that seem like a fit? I know the obvious is that her wife is playing there. I get it. But on paper, actually in the system, would she make sense with a Phoenix team that largely has found its footing with a new regime and an entirely new look starting five minus Kalia Copper, who missed significant time due to injury?
Yeah, at the end of the day, those are conversations you need to have with Dewanna if you're the front office of the Mercury, right? If she's willing to come in and play the role that they need her to play, and you're not really mixing up the locker room, because from all reports we've heard, she's not a bad locker room person. She's a good leader. She's well experienced. Then you absolutely take her. You don't pass on a talented player like that who's got all that experience. And as we know about all basketball, when you get into tense games, particularly in the playoffs, the game slows down. You need somebody in the half court. And on top of that, you've got some injury-prone players out there in Phoenix. If any of them go down, you are plugging and playing one of the better players in the history of the league. So I would absolutely take a flyer on her if she's willing to do it. Obviously, you stated the obvious that her soon-to-be wife is playing over there. They were very, very well fitting together when they were both in Connecticut together. Those teams were making the finals multiple times, right? So that's why I would take a flyer if I was Phoenix. But there are lots of places where she could be a good fit. It's just not these run-and-gun teams. They're a lot younger and need shooting because she's not a great three-point shooter either, like the Fever were.
Speaking of teams that I think want to run and gun, but I don't really know if they know what they are. The Dallas Wings sent Nalyssa Smith away today on this Monday, June the 30th, that we are recording this podcast. According to her X account, Nalyssa was completely blindsided, had no expectations that she would be dealt before the All-Star break. She's dealt to the two-time WNBA champion Las Vegas Aces, though, Kevin, so there are worse places you could be traded, just ask Marina Mabry. But at the same time, my question for you is this. Nalyssa Smith's stock following the 2024 WNBA season was probably at an all-time low in her career. She ends up in Dallas. There's plenty of super sleuths who are also suggesting the only reason that she ended up in Dallas was because her girlfriend, Dejanay Carrington, was the apple of the Dallas Wings' eye when they rebuilt this front office and rebuilt the roster this offseason. But ultimately, the fact that Nalyssa Smith fetched a first-round pick from the Las Vegas Aces says a whole heck of a lot, in my opinion, either A, of what she's been able to do in Dallas over the last month and a half, or B, that maybe the Fever just gave up on her because she didn't fit that run and gun system.
You know, there's an old saying that great players have much longer rope than others, right? So Dejanay Carrington, very good player. Nalyssa Smith, very good player. But they're not A'ja Wilson. They're not Dewanna Bonner. They're not Alyssa Thomas, right? They don't have the pull that she has. If I am the Dallas Wings and I'm offered a first-round pick for her, especially knowing it's a few years down the road where who knows what the Aces look like at that point in time, I'm taking it in an instant. If I'm Nalyssa, I'm thinking to myself, thank goodness I don't have to guard A'ja Wilson anywhere but practice. We know the Aces needed a backup big. We know that they need just some depth on their roster for quality players. I just think it makes a lot of sense for both teams. Dallas probably wasn't thinking that was going to be something they were going to do until they saw the offer that was on the table. And sometimes when you don't have a superstar, you just have to take it if it makes sense. Dallas isn't going anywhere this year. We know that. It's setting them up for long-term success. And hopefully that's a top pick or a really high pick where they can pair somebody with Paige to make them really dynamic for years to come.
Are you surprised it was a one though? Like,
of course.
I mean, like with all due respect to Nalyssa Smith, who, like you said, very good basketball player, a first-round pick. I mean, this is someone who the Fever all but said, yeah, we can operate without her. We're going to bring in these veterans who are more rim runners, or at least Natasha Howard is. And then they drafted KK Thompson out of Florida State, or Timpson, excuse me, because then the thought was, well, Dewanna Bonner will also help fill out that front court, that wing position. We don't need Nalyssa Smith. And now she goes for a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. I can't make it make sense to me.
I would say at the end of the day, you're starting to see picks be valued less and less in every major sport.
True.
Other than football with quarterbacks, because the draft is so hit or miss. It's a crapshoot. It's very hard to identify talent. You can see the player on the court, but what makes them go and what will turn them into the prospect you believe it can be is a lot of mental. It's a lot of stuff you can't really write down and put on paper. And while you're evaluating people, you can talk to their friends, you can talk to their coaches. You're still guessing. You're still guessing every single time. There have been a lot of busts in every league at those top picks. So that's my guess. At the other part of this too, as we get to expansion, you're going to have a lot more players around the league just because you're going to have more roster space. You're going to be able to start keeping those first round picks. So I think the fact it's a couple years down the road is really why this makes a lot more sense. If you're talking about the 10th pick in the first round and the way the draft is currently structured, how many of those players actually make the team? They don't. So that's kind of why it makes a lot more sense considering when the pick is actually going to be made and hoping that, I'm sure if you're Dallas, Las Vegas kind of ends this run that they've had where, you know, Asia's maybe on the move, which is going to be related to the CBA next year. Those type of things can come into play, which is why the decision was made, I'm sure.
Thank you, Cooler Heads and Kevin Schwartz, for prevailing. Now I understand why the beef this week actually makes sense if you are both the Las Vegas Aces and the Dallas Wings.